It's great to have you here, Chiyu, and we've already got a sort of session um, last week, which was really good, I think. And now we are having GARC meeting. GARC is now inviting Chiyu for today's talk. It is titled Loving Hong Kong, Unity and Solidarity in the Politics of Belonging. And I skim read, and it's really provocative, and probably some of you might have something to say after the presentation. But for the moment, I expect Qi to develop his own argument, which he discussed in his paper, and possibly some backgrounds and all that, which haven't been written down on the paper. So to you, maybe 30 minutes to 35 could be. Are you ready? Turn on your microphone.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
This is not going to be a structured lecture. It's just going to coming out of my head, whatever's popping up. Uh, this is an article published, actually just published. It's very hard to get a PDF copy, even myself. And I managed to get the copy eventually from my editor, who ran to the library to make a hard copy because he couldn't get the publisher to supply him a copy. But this is not about national security, although it's like Kosuke said, for some people it's very provocative. Because some people say in the process of review that this paper appears to be some kind of apologist argument for autocratic China. And I'm not surprised because all my articles give people the impression that I'm apologist for China. I think that's a problem of reader or reviewers, not my problem, because I'm not interested in apologizing for any policy. I'm just interested in asking why certain policies are legitimate in the mind of the people who make those policies, and also why it is offensive or insulting to people who disagree with it and even consider it's ontologically impossible choice that the policymaker has been making. And regarding Hong Kong, I think it's interesting to look at China's policy that requests people who lead Hong Kong must be people who love Hong Kong. So it is a very specific request. The only in Chinese terms, 爱国者. If you translate that into English, I think most people translate that into a patriot. It has to be a patriot, Chinese patriot, to rule Hong Kong. But I think this translation tells the problem rather than really give us the correct translation. Since patriot is about emotion, someone who loves the country, who's willing to give herself and to serve the country because she feels somewhat emotionally attached to the country. So that's patriot. Patriot is a kind of a emotional type of character when dealing with the country. But I think it's a problematic translation because patriot suggests an emotion coming out of the person who thinks she's a patriot. But when we talk about 爱国者, the person who rules Hong Kong must love the country. When we talk about this particular term, it doesn't mean that you must have the emotion. And as a matter of fact, emotion is not even important. The person who loved Hong Kong for Deng Xiaoping, who was the first person to lay down this request, this demand, and only people who love Hong Kong could serve as the leader of Hong Kong. When he said that, he meant the person who must execute the policy of one country, two system, which would include Hong Kong being part of China, include the ability to preserve stability and the growth and the welfare of Hong Kong people. If you can do that, then you are qualified as a person who loves Hong Kong. That doesn't mean that emotionally you're involved in your association with Hong Kong or you're belonging to Hong Kong. So the translation itself is problematic. It may give people a wrong idea that loving Hong Kong is emotional for a Chinese one country, two system design. What I want to argue in this paper is that loving Hong Kong for Chinese political culture is not about emotion, it's about obligation. Comparing emotion and obligation, of course, then we immediately can see that emotion is a very individualized process, psychological process, that only the person who feels it can claim that she has the emotion. So whether or not you are patient is something that you have to decide. It's not someone else can decide for you. You want to be a patriot or you are a patriot. You are the person who have to decide whether or not you are a patriot, because that's an emotional thing. But then loving Hong Kong as an obligation, that means that if you don't love Hong Kong, there will be consequence. If there's a consequence, then it's not your choice. It's something going to happen to you, something going to happen to Hong Kong. If you root Hong Kong without a love for Hong Kong, an obligation to preserve welfare and stability for Hong Kong. So if there is an emotional element involving in this loving Hong Kong practice, then it is about anxiety rather than something positive, rather than passion or enthusiasm, is anxiety, because there will be consequence, there will be punishment, there will be bad results if you rule Hong Kong without loving Hong Kong, without the capacity or the sense of obligation to preserve stability and welfare for Hong Kong. So that's about loving Hong Kong. So that gives me the sense of there are two different kinds of love. So I go back to the literature and try to figure out where all these two different kinds of loves originally comes from, cosmologically, where they come from in the beginning. Then I realized this being patriot, being obligation, love, can be reflected in two terms that we use in politics very often. One is solidarity and the other is unity. Solidarity is something that Europeans love to say. Solidarity and unity are often translated when they are used in Chinese. They're translated into the same term called 团结. But obviously, it's wrong because, like I said, that solidarity is an emotional thing. It means willingly to support or to provide help, to provide assistance with passion, with enthusiasm. It's a personal choice out of your own affective kind of makeup that you need to help people. It's like you watch people being victimized by some strong power. Then you want to help the people who being victimized. If you don't help the people, then you feel that you are also being victimized. So you are able to be sympathetic with the victims. So that's kind of a solidarity love. So you are able to help. It doesn't matter who the person is. In that particular context or that scenario, if you don't provide help, then you feel yourself being not a good human being. So solidarity love has the imagination of some kind of a universal humanity. It doesn't matter who the other person is when you provide your support or assistance. So it's kind of a universal love that comes from the imagination of state of nature, from Hobbes, from Locke, from Rousseau. Uh, uh, People have this natural need to help each other so that they can handle um, the power of nature, which sometimes is merciless. So you can help each other to deal with difficulty in life. So you help me, then I help you. So we come together to deal with difficulties that individually we will not be able to handle. So it's a necessity, it's a need. So that kind of a solidarity reflect or actually involve a universal love. So if we see a totalitarian countries where people are suppressed, we want to intervene, we want to help. It's not that because we know them or because they're our friends, so we want to help. But then the other love is it's unity. Unity means everybody comes together and without thinking about ourselves. So it's a love without individual personhood. It's a love to give up yourself. It's love of sacrifice, and it's a practice of belonging, and this kind of a belonging is mandated because if you don't belong, then you will not survive uh, the competition of the monarchy or the struggles in the anarchy or suppression of an unexpected tyranny. So you will not survive all this kind of difficulty if you don't give up yourself to organize everything. So this is kind of a unity. And unity informs a different kind of love. It's not about universal love. It's a love that it's a kind of a love that you trust that you will be given if in a reciprocal way if you love back. So people must love each other as obligation. So that makes you to form unity, even though you don't love each other. So you have two different kinds of love. One is solidarity love. The other is unity love. Solidarity love is universal love. So you can love strangers as long as they fall into a wrong situation. And then you cannot accept that situation. So you have to help the other person. And that kind of love is a universal love. You're emotionally involved because that is a harbinger for your own situation. So universal love also reflects some kind of a self-love. So you love yourself, so you love each other as we are all the same human being. So whatever violate our universal humanities, we must help each other. So that kind of universal love. But then reciprocal love is different. Reciprocal love is an obligation that you have to come together in order to survive. So by coming together, you are obliged to tell each other that we will help each other. So you must give up yourself. But this is very hard to promise. So you have to have someone sitting at the top, someone come to show to everyone else, I am truly selfless. I can show benevolence to all of you. I can sacrifice myself for the existence, for the survival of you all. So you will be able to accept each other. Once you accept each other, so we all related. So we all safe, we all secure. That's kind of a reciprocal love, beginning with the benevolent love of someone winning trust of everyone else and becoming the leader because she is truly selfless. So she was loved by everyone else as a reciprocal, as an obligation, because the person at the top loved everyone else, so everyone else should love her. So this is two different kind of love. And then Deng Xiaoping is talking about loving Hong Kong. I think obviously he was talking about benevolent love and reciprocal love. But then the problem, of course, is that in Hong Kong, once this one country system start operating, the people in Hong Kong, they expect that this represents some kind of autonomy. People in Hong Kong would have an autonomous system that allow them to rule their own affairs instead of being intervened or being guided by China. But for China, the Hong Kong belonging to China. The only reason that Hong Kong can enjoy stability and prosperity is because the motherland loved Hong Kong. So the Hong Kong people must provide reciprocal love to the motherland. It's their obligation. If they don't provide reciprocal love, there will be consequence. There will be bad consequence. So they expect Hong Kong to provide reciprocal love back, and that doesn't mean that Hong Kong people need to emotionally attach to China. It's more like a role love. It's a reciprocal role obligation. So you love the motherland. It is because the motherland sacrificed itself in order to preserve the stability and the prosperity in Hong Kong. But then people in Hong Kong request to substantiate the autonomous system as they understood it from a natural law tradition, the lens of natural law, the lens of state of nature or natural rights, is of course that everyone has to make a decision for themselves. So it is necessary that the power to control or the power to govern in Hong Kong belong only to the people in Hong Kong, because that's what if I am a patriot, then I must feel my emotional attachment to Hong Kong. So I be the person who decide whether I want to love Hong Kong and how I want Hong Kong to be ruled or to be governed. So whatever that is not stated or specifically mentioned in the basic law, and those residual power not mentioned in the Constitution or in the basic law naturally belong to the people of Hong Kong, who will decide how they should love Hong Kong, how to be a patriot in Hong Kong, so they can emotionally devote themselves to Hong Kong and establish solidarity between Hong Kong people. But then that's certainly a problem. That's certainly a negation of reciprocal love. So for the Chinese government, for the PRC, the premise, of course, that the reason you enjoy autonomy is because I give you autonomy. The reason I give you autonomy because I have benevolence for you. I don't want anything from you, so you can enjoy prosperity and stability. So you should show gratitude. You should be reciprocal. So you should show how you love the motherland. So if you want something, you should talk to us. Then we can negotiate. But that violates this natural rights that only I can govern. Only with my consent, I can be governed. So there's this kind of a misunderstanding taking place. Then I find what's interesting when I reflect upon this mutual misunderstanding, I realized that this universal love has been used by critical thinkers um, in the 40s and the 50s, 1940s and 1950s, to provide some kind of psychological therapy to society where people fail to love each other, people lose their humanity, people start massacring each other, like Nazi, or later on in the Chinese Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. So there was this psychotherapy kind of approach that believing that if you are able to love each other, you will be able to restore your subjectivity. That means you become a full human. Then you will attain humanity. Once you attain humanity, then you will not massacre each other. So practicing universal love, practicing solidarity love will restore your humanity. So universal love becomes a therapy for the society who lost their humanity. So that's where I think the same motivation that Hong Kong people uh, struggling to get their autonomous rights can acquire support from all over the world in the liberal society, because people feel they have solidarity with Hong Kong people. Everyone believes that individuals should have the rights to decide how they should be governed. So they come in to help Hong Kong as to show their solidarity. It's a universal love. But for Chinese, that's very weird. That's bizarre. That's even horrible because you have no relationship with Hong Kong people. You you provide no good, no value to Hong Kong. You are not responsible for Hong Kong's stability or prosperity. You come in to claim you love Hong Kong and want to support Hong Kong's people's autonomous rights. So that must be there must be conspiracy behind your intervention, because there's no reason for you to love Hong Kong, but there's all the reason for Hong Kong people to love China. So how can Hong Kong people turn around to have solidarity with someone who have no reason to love Hong Kong, and turning away from China, who have shown all the benevolent love to Hong Kong? So there must be something wrong. So China tried to control this situation, but the controlling violates, of course, Hong Kong people's humanity, which includes govern their own society. And then that becomes the source of anxiety for liberals outside of Hong Kong. So they come in to support and help. So here, then I think there is a cosmological relationship behind these two kinds of love. For Confucianism, for Chinese unity love, the cosmological order is that you have to be reciprocal. You have to be someone who had already established relationship with you. But then for the natural rights, a completely different cosmological configuration, and that breeds different kinds of love. That you love strangers, not because they are related to you by blood or by whatever relationship, but simply because they are human beings. On the other hand, you are entitled to love someone or to be loved by someone is because you already have this natural benevolence, like that exists between relatives, between people with blood relationship, between friends, good friends. So you have these two different kind of a cosmological order, breeding two different kinds of love, and then showing them in Hong Kong and interpreting one country, two system completely in different ways. And then they collide in Hong Kong. And I think I'll stop here first and then see how people want to continue. Then we can either go into the specific in the Hong Kong situation, or we can go back to the abstract philosophical level and discuss uh, different kinds of love. I think I'll stop here.
Thanks very much. So, to start, would you turn down your volume a little bit? Yeah, you don't have to stop your microphone, but just turn down the volume. So, better start with questioning, maybe. Do you have any questions for clarification or whatever the reason? Is everyone okay? Okay, Andrew.
Thank you very much. I actually have, I think, too many questions. So I'm holding back. If anybody, please do, by all means, do interrupt me in between my questions. Any time. Mr. Kim, please, by all means, please do go ahead.
Sorry, I think I should ask the question first because I have only one question. So I'm thinking about the situation of Hong Kong and the response from the Chinese people in mainland China. And what do you think about this phenomena is related to another one sort of one aspect of a response to colonialism or history of colonialism in China, because it is very interesting that I'm always curious about why mainland Chinese people love so much Hong Kong in their own way. That and I think it is also relevant to the sort of one response of colonialism. So I want to hear your insights. Thank you.
I tend to think colonialism in Hong Kong and colonialism or quasi-colonialism in China all mattered. Colonialism in Hong Kong perhaps matters more in terms of people in Hong Kong's response to China's taking over. China's taken over as a motherland. Once it took over, Hong Kong, because of being colonized before, becomes inferior. And one country system, as a reification of benevolent love from Chinese perspective, reproduce this sense of inferiority, because autonomy is only given to me as a gift. It's not anything that's guaranteed. It depends on my performance. So from Hong Kong people's point of view, returning to the so-called motherland connotes inferiority. This doesn't happen. This has not happened to other colonies in the world after World War II, after the 60s and 70s. In most places, when colonies became independent, local people would take over the regime. They would establish their own regime. Doesn't matter how much colonial legacy continues at the site, but they took over. But in Hong Kong, Taiwan, when colonial forces left, it was someone else taking over the regime. And in the eyes of someone else, that's China, the Chinese regimes, colonized people becoming independent, but actually becoming inferior. Because in the eyes of Chinese masters, they're not pure, they're being colonized. The only way to restore their dignity is to look back or talk back to their motherland from the colonial modernity point of view. So they have colonial modernity, which China lacked. So they were actually superior to China. If you talk about colonial modernity, if you rely on colonial modernity to regain your self-dignity in front of a supposed culturally superior China, then you are destined to rely on former colonial masters. That's why Hong Kong would not question all the colonizing suppression that British had inflicted on Hong Kong. Just like the Taiwanese population would not question the Japanese colonial ruling, doesn't matter how suppressive or inhumane it had been, it didn't matter, because I don't need that. I don't need to know that. If I went back to that similar situation, then I would have to accept my inferiority in today's situation. So I have to forget about colonialism and grabbed only colonial modernity in order to face the motherland. And that, of course, becomes a very strong challenge to China, who's also halfly colonized in modern history. So it almost becomes that you are using the same colonial master, which also colonized China or semi-colonized China before, to establish your dignity. So I think colonialism matter in both ways, not what Chinese people or Hong Kong people wanted. This is left over by colonialism. So it seems there's no way out. They have to face each other in such a way. And Hong Kong people have to rely on universal law that give them or confirm them the colonial modernity they need to face China.
Yes, thanks very much.
If there is there any follow-up or question or comment from you, Mr. If not, then I do actually have one in regards to what you
Jin Jian raised hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't see.
No, just very quick one. Okay, so thank you, Professor Shi, for once again enlightening us before you finish your fellowship here. Yeah, I think well, I have just two quick comments and one follow-up question, but maybe these are still fewer than Andrew's, so I think it's better to jump in now. Yeah, because when I was reading your article, I was reminded that many years ago when I took your political psychology and we were reading James Glass, and it's good to see his name popping up again in the article, and also like the importance of having a capable mother holding the child to help this child to become more, I don't know, fully formed human being and so on. So that's to me, that's a I don't know, it's like all of a sudden I could refresh my memory, and I think I did very bad in your political psychology class, even though I got good grade. And I was reminded about a recent incident, maybe some of you have come across. So apparently some cabin crews of Cathay Pacific, they were flying the route between Hong Kong and Chengdu, and then they complained about mainland passengers' poor English. And apparently in their announcements, they apparently only use Cantonese and English. And to me, this is very intriguing. It's as if they wanted to give all passengers the impression that this is not a domestic route. This is more like international flight. And then if you cannot speak appropriate English, then well, it's, you embarrass yourself. And then eventually, after that incident was made public, those cabin crews, they were fired, and Cathay Pacific had to apologize. And then the responses from mainland netizens, I think, is quite illustrative, because their response was from the perspective of reciprocal love. So they are saying, oh, come on, because of us, because of the mainland market, that's why your airliners, your companies can make money. And then you are not grateful, but now you are making fun of our poor English. So so to me, that's a very very interesting, well, very pertinent, because that helps me to understand why like Hong Kong people and mainland Chinese, they have quite different responses, because they are informed by different kind of love, different kind of cosmological orientations. The question, now we know there are two kinds of loves that inform people in these two I don't know, post-colonial societies. And what would be their exit strategy, or any ways to heal this kind of I don't know, but I think both are wounded, but how can we treat them? So this is just this is something just I want to ask. Thank you.
From Jim Glass' point of view, of course, that there must be somebody holding the child, let the child be fanatic, crying, whatever, and then eventually the child will be able to regroup itself and learn how to handle this negative self-feeling. In that sense, then of course, United States should embrace China. Whatever China will do, United States will take it, and then eventually China will not feel threatened by United States. And China should hold Hong Kong. Whatever Hong Kong people do, just let it do. So Hong Kong people would feel being autonomous again, so they can act with mutual respect. That's from liberal love, or from Jim Glass' point of view. But from Chinese parental or benevolent love point of view, you have to, like Fromm has said, that you have to try to love. Through love, you establish relationship. With relationship, you would not need to be a completely independent, autonomous individual. You don't need that anymore, because you can belong to a relationship safely. But since you don't belong to that relationship, the way to create a relationship is to give love. And this love, from Jim Glass, from Fromm's point of view, is true love. It's full of emotion. It's true love. So you're able to love. Once you know you're able to love, you have subjectivity. But in the Confucian society, that's not the case. It's not that emotionally you are confident you are able to love. Rather, is the material benefit you can provide to the other side, to demonstrate to the other side. You will never be a threat to the other side. So you will be accepted. Then you can belong. So it's different approach, but then it's the person who have to make the first initiative. Everyone thinking of first initiative, and then the reciprocal relationship will be established very easily. If you are unable to incur reciprocal response, then you can provide support or gift the second time and the third time and still could not invoke any positive response, then you give up. You know the other side is a bad guy. She has no intention to accept you. She doesn't want to coexist. So you know that. So, but I don't know whether that's a therapy or not, or that's a plausible therapy or not. But that's what I think two different cultures has been practicing. That's what they do. Whether or not they are, efficient, I don't know. Maybe within their own society, their own community, that works. Right? But if go outside, it might actually engender misunderstanding. Perhaps you really want a solution, you should ask Pei Ying. Or Kosuke, we need Buddhist input here. Yeah. And as a footnote to that, of course, if we don't have this sovereignty, this institution of a sovereignty on top of everyone's head, all this will not happen. People living their daily life very easily get along with each other, even though they're quite different, coming from quite different cultures. But with a sovereignty, you're forcing people to take sides, then there will be a problem.
So Pei Yin, you want to go on?
Yes. Well, I just want to share some thoughts. I mean, perhaps it's not a question type of question, but and also like Qing Chang, Shi Lao's today's talk really reminded me of the political psychology, the class we took. It was a great fun, but perhaps I didn't really, I didn't know how to apply that methodology to do to write a good paper. So today is a good demonstration. So I enjoy reading it. But I mean, I have this doubt. I mean, I think it's really, I can understand the logic of, we talk about politics of belongings, and but I think, in politics we talk about, we don't talk about love or Confucianism actually. I mean, religion talks about love. So what my feeling about, when I first read this paper, my straightforward, the sense I felt strange comes from my own experience. I mean, it would be hard for me to say I love my country. I mean, perhaps I'm too postmodern. I mean, I cannot say I love Taiwan. I say I love the nation state. I mean, I would love my friends or family. So I mean, it's understandable. It's natural. We need a sense of belonging. We need to have a sense of community. So politicians would create a narrative for this sense of community. But would love be a too strong word in our culture? And so this reminded me that many years ago, when we had a presidential election, and everyone was talking about loving Taiwan, and I think I was studying in Britain. When I heard about the news talking about you should love Taiwan, then all those statements sound very alien to me, because I just felt how can you say you love the nation? So it's just not natural to me. Is it fair? I mean, my question would be this one: is it fair to say this is a fake love? But of course, you can say there are two kinds of love. The one is a fake love. Can we say that? And yeah. So I mean, do you really think Confucianism can talk about love? I mean, is that their intention? So I mean, those are just like random thoughts.
I can talk about love in two ways. one way is to talk about love in English. So it's very easy to talk about love in English because love is such a natural word in English. We are universal human, so we can love. And the other in Chinese, you can talk about 仁爱, benevolent love, which is very usual for politicians to talk about. So if you say somebody who shows 仁爱, benevolent love, that's I think that's also acceptable. Otherwise, love conveys some kind of a lust or desire. That's not very good for Confucian society. You're right. I agree with you.
Is it okay, Peng? Okay. Does it mean, Andre, wait a little bit. I'm more interested.
Please don't mind me.
Sort of translation problem in this context. When you said love in Chinese and love in English, and different connotations there, and even in Japanese, love means something else. But we are having this presumption that when we use the term love, benevolence, or virtue, or all those words, we believe that we are talking about the same things, but actually we are really not. Yeah. And my question is related to Chin Chan's last question. How are we going to get out from this situation? That means it seems like Chi said sort of binary oppositions between liberal democracy or liberal idea versus Confucianism, and both are wounded, as Chin Chan said. Then we are also talking about English and Chinese. Then how about sort of different ways of translating words? It might have some ways to overcome the situation. And my question is how you define language in the context of your arguments. That's my question.
I'm not very confident of talking about this linguistic analysis in the public because I have no literature background. But this is, but since we are talking, then of course we can discuss this. I am very sensitive to the use of language, and I always try to say things differently. So that people would not be restrained by their own language when they try to understand each other. And that's also why I start trying critical translation, trying to translate a concept in a very abstract way. It's so abstract that the other side cannot understand the term by using its background, its cultural background. And then I want to translate that abstract term back to the original language and let people see when your concept removed from your culture, how does it look like? How do you feel about a concept in your culture where culture is removed? I don't know what will happen, but I think that's kind of an experiment I have been doing since, I think, 2017, when I started translating 天下, when I started translating relations. I translate relation as something like resemblance, the shared resemblance. Anywhere we believe that we resemble each other, that we are related. I translate that in order to include both Buddhist or feminist relationship and a Confucian relationship and a Ubuntu relationship. I translate in a very abstract way. But I mean, this is very philosophical. This is very elitist. You know, obviously, this cannot be a solution to the problem we are facing. And sometimes I don't even think we should try to look for solutions. These solutions, if they are really rational, then usually they cause more problems than we can expect. You know, it's the world doesn't operate according to logic. So oftentimes I shy from providing solutions. But of course, then I have to suffer the result. If I don't provide solution and I give a logic to the other side, then I become apologist in the eyes of my side, right?
What I'm asking is, I've been reading Nishida's philosophy, and there is an argument that Nishida's philosophy can be understood as the philosophy of language for some people, and which is quite reasonable, I thought. And according to him, it is a process. Self-recognition is based upon sort of finding. It's quite difficult to explain. We see something, and something itself has its own power to unfold itself into something tangible. And that is actually in the form of language. And a similar thing was actually written by Karen Fierk of St. Andrews. And she explains that when we see quantum physics, everything is wave, but wave appears to become particle to us. So you need someone to define that the smallest unit of things is actually particle. But you know, finding particle is more like sort of capturing the moment of wave, and that is so-called wave collapse in quantum physics. And same thing can be explained, or same thing can be said about the reality is narrated, and because of this narration, the reality becomes reality. So reality is undescribable, as you can tell. All right, it's beyond words, beyond language. But once you use language, then it appears to us as something with meaning. Right. So the thing is, when you see someone in world affairs, for example, refugees, but they are not refugees because they are narrated as refugees. They are people, right? But once someone calls them refugees, they suddenly become they appear to us as refugees. I mean, that's a language function, right?
Yeah. I wrote a whole book on that. And you reviewed the book, I remember.
Oh, yeah.
Once something is uttered, then it's no longer the something that you want to signify, right? That's a problem. Like people's hearts, like Confucians always talk about people's hearts, right? But who are the people? Right? If you're a social scientist, you would ask, who are the people? But it's not really real people. It's discursive people. It's that you should love people. People is a collective term. It's not something specific. If real living people act in a way that's not the collective symbol that to be loved, then you have a problem. So you would not allow incongruence to appear between living people and your discursive people. So either you satisfy them so they would not show their incongruence, or you silence them or kill them so they will not say their incongruence. So you're right that we always use the language to represent something. We need something to tell us who is watching us, who is teaching us to use this language. But we cannot have an answer, right? If we have an answer, that cannot be right. It has to be another symbol. So simply by realizing that we're being watched, we're being taught, is a way to gain some kind of a half self-realization. But you cannot get full self-realization, right? Because you have no instrument. So unless you go to the moment you were born, the infant, at the moment, the moment infant is born, it feels the gratitude, it feels hunger. And that's true self, right? And as the infant grows, then you lose yourself. So I don't have a solution. I mean, I don't even intend to have a solution.
Yeah, then the question is it a good idea to have some kind of confrontational description about China with Confucianism and West as liberal democracy?
Well, in that sense, it can be therapeutic. You're right. In a sense that either you inferior people, and then they have to think. It's a way of unlearning, right? So unlearning is kind of a half self-realization. I think you're right. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to force people to unlearn.
Okay, thanks very much. And I kept Andrew waiting for questioning. You said there are tons of questions.
Yes, I do. If I may, I actually tried to combine three questions into one, so do forgive me if they seem a bit incompatible. I also actually let me just skip the positive comments from my side for time's sake, and my questions read more like devil's advocate's opinions, because I did have a lot of unlearning momentum by reading your paper. Where's the one? Actually, in regards to your paper, and also to Mr. Kim's question about colonialism and your answer to this, it sounded very much like you are presuming a perfect insulation of actors, of state-centric actors, whereby we have China embodying certain values, Hong Kong others, the West here being represented by America. And in regards to colonialism and the section that you wrote on colonialism and the passage of ownership or of affiliation, for lack of a better term, it sounded to me very much like you applied a linear temporal logic which treated China as embodying pure Confucian virtues. But if I remember correctly, Lily Ling would disagree, and she would say that you would find a lot of Occidentalism in China as well. Perhaps a less post-positivist example would be the capitalism of Chinese values being present in China. And so when you talked about universal love being tied to loving a stranger, again creating separating actorhood, and Confucian love not involving strangers, I couldn't help but think of it as a very Huntingtonian perspective, defining strangers and those inside a family in more than just geographical or regional terms, but also in I don't want to say civilizational terms, but perhaps. And thank you so much for bearing with me. So just find number 3. Connected to these, I think I might have misinterpreted, but it sounded like you assumed that Hong Kong is in a faithful relationship with China. But does some of its heart not still also lie with the UK, or with as a representation of the West, or of Western liberalism? And so perhaps a less state-centric view might regard it as a polyamorous relationship with other influencing factors and values present there at the same time.
Well, I had argument with Lily about using categories. I think categories is necessary for our analysis. Analytical categories, or you mentioned civilizational categories, although I don't like civilizational categories, but categories of sovereignty or state center and those things, or confusion versus, or strangers or not strangers. I think these categories are very important to show the agency of real people who can move between categories. But Lily doesn't like binaries, doesn't like this kind of definable concept. But I think people are being trained to use all these categories and concepts and objects, names, to organize their life. If you want to pull them out, you don't tell them not using any of this. You tell them that you are not using this the same way other people are using it. So there are different ways of moving across categories and concepts and values and civilizations. So we can define, oh, this is a Confucian civilization, but that doesn't mean any single person has to be either this or that. So people have agency. What locked them into binary is the concept. So it is the binary already exists, so people act in accordance with binaries. So we have to face binary, we have to confront binaries. Instead of saying no, you don't use binaries. That's I have an argument with Lily some time ago about this. So I don't mind using categories.
Would you consider yourself a structuralist?
Consider what?
Would you consider yourself a structuralist?
No.
So you would not perceive of those categories, many not intangible in nature, as structures influencing actors.
No, they are components of identities. They're guidance of practices, but they are not natural. You have all the category have to be practiced, has to be used, has to be reproduced in order to be there. So if you have a social consensus, everyone use category this way, and I don't, I become psychotic, right? Because I'm not acting in a socially consensual way, right? But that doesn't mean their category is correct, right? But I can analyze why I am being considered as a psychotic. I understand that. Then I can explain, so that I can explain that the reason you guys look at me in this way is because you are being locked into this category. So I am the real person to show you that the categories are fine, but don't let them lock you.
It sounds very much like pragmatism plays a very big role in your work, in your thoughts, and it's partially answers my next question, which is again about a binary, namely Western or universal love and benevolent love. Again, the question begs many questions. Is universal love not benevolent? That's not what I meant actually here. But how many other types of love are there? And perhaps for pragmatism's sake, you just focus on these two to make a point. But even these two, they seem to me rather similar in nature. So I couldn't help but think of communitarianism and cosmopolitanism when I read your paper, and so it sounded very much to me that you created this cosmopolitanism, communitarianism binary, and in essence, however, they seem to have a very similar foundation of exclusion and othering. So in terms of cosmopolitanism or universal love or liberal love, we have those who don't follow us. In Bush's words, those who are not with us are against us. And you have communitarianism, where those outside our community are not part of us, but also those inside our community who do not follow us have to be punished, have to be disciplined. Perhaps linking back to your balance of relationship argument. And so basically both of these types of love or relationship norms would follow the principles of following and submitting to higher goods. So they don't seem too different in my opinion, actually.
Well, you can certainly find similarity. They need an object to be loved or not loved, right? They're certainly they must be placed in relationship in order to be meaningful. These are all similar things, similar process. But then universal love is, like I said, it's very individualized. It's emotional. That you feel it, there is a passion. Role love or duty love or unity, you don't feel the passion. It's obligation. So there is difference. So you can stress their similarity. You can also stress their difference. And you're right. There's a problem with this paper only comparing solidarity and unity. To the neglect of many other kinds of love. I realize that problem, but I cannot solve it because I only know China and the West. I don't know anyone else. That's why I'm trying to cooperate with other people to write about Ubuntu. So I hope to establish dialogue between Hong Kong and India, for example. But then Indian colleagues telling me, oh, that's a huge challenge here because everyone want to tell how they are being distinctive or different to the West.
Yeah.
Everyone want to demonstrate they are being different to the West.
It's interesting that you mentioned the West as embodying individualism and therefrom stemming democracy and capitalism and so on, and the some of the non-West being more communitarian in nature. Again, you even see in Japan you have ikigai, which could be roughly translated as the purpose of living, and this one is, as appears at first sight, totally detached from individualism, where it's a selfless role of the individual to contribute to the greater good of the community. However, in consequence, doing so is for the pleasure and for the well-being of the individual. So even in this case, you would find it very hard to separate individualism and communitarianism.
Yeah, but then when you say it, you're actually using individualism and communitarianism to explain why they are not separable, right? So in that sense, the categories are useful, right?
Useful, yes, categories.
Yeah. So I think it's great. It's a great example, right? Like feminism. Feminism is not about men versus women, right? But then it oftentimes was portrayed as this by very masculine men, saying that they being target as men. But by saying that, they actually marginalize a huge group of men who are not masculine, right? but that's, we all have that problem. That's why I think I mentioned in the papers that I'm doing this as two ways of love. That doesn't mean that people can only show one kind of love. I think I mentioned somewhere in the paper about this. That's the way I break binary. I break the binary by giving people the agency to be different from stereotyped category.
Thanks. I guess it's kind of dangerous to name individualism versus communitarianism kind of thing. It's a typical categorization, and actually, if my reading is missing something, you just tell me. But I don't think Chi was having this idea of communitarianism in his paper, but it is rather Andre that's naming Chi argument as communitarian. But it doesn't sound, it doesn't appear to me as communitarian, but it's more like sort of Confucian. And Confucianism doesn't necessarily mean that you're communitarian. There are some variants in Confucianism. So rather than sort of making a binary opposition of individualism versus communitarianism, probably it's a good idea to say something like liberal idea versus Confucianism. That's actually you used in your paper.
I do use communitarian love once in the paper to maybe this is not a good strategy. I fully agree with Kosuke that I'm not a communitarian, not at all. But then, and I think communitarians from Confucian point of view is actually more on the side of individualist than on the communitarian side. But anyway, I do use communitarianism, I think in one or two places in the paper, to show that Hong Kong can be a place which combine both solidarity and unity. So it becomes communitarian in the sense that it's still individualistic. It still have passion for humanity. But then it's also, in a way, looking for unity. So they would treat Chinese patriot in Hong Kong differently, as if the Chinese patriot should not enjoy human rights. If they enjoy human rights, then Chinese and Hong Kong will be the same. Then they lose the whole purpose of, constructing Hong Kong identity. Hong Kong identity is that Hong Kong has modernity, China does not. If Chinese people can also enjoy human rights, it would be weird. So they don't treat Chinese people expatriated in Hong Kong the same way. They want to treat other Hong Kong. So in that sense, they're not universal, but they're using universal, and they're helping strangers. A lot of strangers in Hong Kong, they're helping each other. Like, I don't know whether you remember or not, there's a huge group of people stuck in the airport. and there's no transportation return, and there are over 5,000 of cars, middle class, driving to the airport to pick up those kids, let them go back to Central and to other place in Hong Kong. So that's kind of a universal love, right? They don't know each other. They're strangers. They're coming together because they have the same cause. That's the mode of universal love. But that they don't include Chinese. So I use communitarianism in a very ironic way.
I get the feeling you use it.
Yeah.
I feel like you use communitarianism when you talk about agency, when you talk about actors, not really not when you talk about the mainstream individualism, communitarianism distinction.
Maybe I don't remember exactly where I use it.
Probably, Andre, you have to be careful. Chi sometimes uses sort of same word we know of in a different way. So you have to be careful. He always confuses me.
Yeah, it helps very much with having a monologue in the head while reading his papers. So it's very interesting.
Okay, any other questions, comments? One being you haven't talked anything today.
Okay, my colleague just left the office. I was thinking, how to say that? It could be a very provocative question, but it do exist. I think for Hong Kong people, some of them tend to redefine country. Like some of them separate China and the Beijing regime. So if we don't talk about this distinction, it would be very difficult to persuade people like them. So how to convince them that there is a possibility that the country would love them like the Confucians did in the past. So it would be difficult for them to reimagine China to have such Confucian love for them, especially when they feel like they were being attacked. If they, like in the 2019 riots, like they were all portrayed as dissidents that have to be like viruses. They have to like all, purged in a way. So how could they accept that? This is a similar comment that I received from my reviewers. So even though I do have the sympathy and for this paper, but I will think that there is a bunch of people who will not be convinced by this alternative. So how would you respond to them?
That's really not my problem, because I'm not trying to solve Chinese problem in Hong Kong, but they try to solve Chinese problem in Hong Kong, and they cannot get the results. So they treat people who are not able to provide an answer to that question, or not taking that question as their research question, as apologists. That's their problem. The Chinese approach to this puzzle or to this challenge is to give them such a huge gift so nobody would doubt you're being loved. That's the Chinese approach. So they're getting together all those incredible landlords. The Hong Kong lands being owned by only a few bunch of landlords, huge landlords. They get them together and force them to release land And then the government spent almost half of its next decade's budget on develop these lands so that to provide good living conditions with bearable rent or mortgage to younger generations. That's the Chinese approach. Pei Ying said, that it's very difficult for Chinese to show emotional love. So people don't even want to use the word love, but they have a role to show love. So they use material benefit, which is very huge, to convince you that we're not your enemies. That's Marxian, right? That's very Marxian in logic, material based. But that's also Confucian in a sense, right? Confucius is very concerned about living conditions, right? So I don't know how what's the best way to solve the problem, but I think the Chinese approach is to provide and provide and provide.
Okay. Now, Andre, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. As a follow-up, why one might, again, a devil's advocate might say, what about the Western ODA, official development aid, or other grand economic assistance to stranger countries or to strangers? Or at the same time, why do you consider economic assistance or economic financial presence benevolent love, but not the provision of political freedoms, which would
again, from a Confucian perspective, political freedom is allowed when you satisfy your role obligation, you satisfy the ritual requirement. So in the public life, everyone is being reciprocal, accepting each other, providing each other gifts, and then everybody is free to be different in their own private space, or not even private space. Sometimes public space, as long as you perform your role first. So for Chinese, that's the kind of political freedom they have in mind. It's the entitlement to be different, only allowed after you have sacrificed some of your independence so that you can belong to the group.
But perhaps my thoughts are still too mainstream, but similar conditionalities exist in the universe, what you would consider universal love. You would have IMF's structural adjustment programs and say you have to do these and these and these to get money from us, or well, not democratic peace, but liberal peace, right? You would get all of these benefits by joining the club of civilized nations and free nations. There's all those economic benefits if you fulfill these and these criteria, which brings me back to my earlier comment about submission and following.
But that's very, very different. Chinese is what the neoliberal order is, that you have all to be the same individual person. Then you can have your own opinion. You can have your different preference. So opinion and preference define your specialty. So you're special. You're special. You're not different. You're special. We're all the same. We have the same humanity. But everyone is special because they have different opinion. They have different preferences. But since the pre-modern Chinese world, everyone is different. We're not just comparing people to people. We're comparing people to animals, people to flowers, to weeds, to mountains, to clouds. So everything is essentially the same. It's called Tao, right? Tao compose everything. So ultimately, we're all equal. But the reason that we have to act in a hierarchical way is because we want to keep everything in harmony. Once everything in harmony, you can be a piece of cloud, you can be a fish, you can be a housewife, anything you want to be. So you can be completely different. You can adopt different ontology. You don't have to be the same human being in order to enjoy your difference. So this is an ontological configuration. It's different ontological configuration. You cannot have different opinion or preference. Then you can be different. And the liberal order is the other way around. Right? We are all the same, then you are entitled to different opinion and preference.
Then a question arises. As Andre said, when we assume that current China is providing some reciprocal relations with other nations, like sort of providing, let's say, wealth to other nations in order to develop themselves, right? It's a typical ODA kind of thing. But in reality, if you go to some places like Africa, where Chinese investment is now, you can see tons of money, injected in that land, but not many places. The only place I actually know is South Africa, and there's huge investment from China, and they, in the first place, they really they're grateful of receiving that money, but eventually they said they are sort of trying to use South Africa for their own benefit, and their attitudes are really arrogant onto local people. And I just thought it might be the case that they're bringing in not just money, but Confucian hierarchical relations between lord and subject, and senior and junior, kind of thing. And so to me, it is more like sort of expansion of particular cosmology on the basis of Confucianism, which appears to some local people simply sort of expansion of imperialism. And to me, that's something. I understand the Confucian idea, and I do admire the tributary system, which is absolutely great system of maintaining peace. But in sort of implanting that same system into the present, there are huge troubles you actually see. So that's the point, I thought.
Well, I think two responses. I think place like South Africa, there's no such thing as a hierarchy because they're strangers. You don't establish a stranger with hierarchy. I think racism is a better description. So they don't care. And secondly, there is a cosmological order or partnership or hierarchy between China and South Africa at official level. So the Beijing authority would understand China-South Africa relationship as reciprocal, as amicable, so they could turn the problems. They could try to improve the problem overnight. Try to do something again, enormous to show their goodwill. So you will see cycles. I remember I did a short article called Harmonious Racism. So in practice, on the ground, there's so much racism. It's not hierarchy, it's racism because they're outside, they're strangers, we don't know them, so we don't care about them. And they're not the same race. So they think differently. We don't care. So that's racism. That's not hierarchy. That's because of lack of Confucianism. But on the other hand, there is a Confucian approach at official level. So you see this discrepancy of state, heads of state can embrace each other, but down on ground, managers refuse to touch African workers. So I see two things here. One is racism. The other is harmonious racism, is the Confucian approach that could change things overnight. But then you can only change things overnight for a while. Racism will come back. It's like cycles.
Then you might criticize Chinese government for being not Confucian enough.
Because if you're Confucian enough, you'll find a way to let strangers like you, love you. That's what officially, the authorities have that policy. But in practice, enterprise don't.
And probably that's the reason why people started sort of seeing China as kind of ambivalent way. I mean,
it's not just in South Africa. If you go to Vietnam on the borders, you go to, I don't know, everywhere, I think, you have a bunch of Chinese consider the local people lower. Even in the United States, there will be Chinese group consider local people, local Americans lower.
So, but in the teachings of Confucianism, that shouldn't be the case.
No, if that becomes the case, the problem lies in the Beijing authorities. They're not a good model, so their citizens would go out to rob people's wealth.
Probably one of the reasons why I don't really subscribe to Confucianism is because this country, Japan, is also full of Confucian teachings everywhere, and I don't have much good experience with them. I'm always sort of seeing all those arrogant people sort of discriminating women and minorities and everything, and I always think that, okay, they are Confucians, They believe that women are not good enough to become one of those officials and everything. And my mother was always up against it. So that's the reason why I'd rather subscribe to Buddhism rather than Confucianism. But I think I should learn more about Confucianism, actually.
This guy, this what's Wanshan Maruyama? Is that, how do you say it? Maruyama actually once mentioned that Japan learned from Europe and from China, but that only learns the corpse rather than the spirit. So maybe the Japanese Confucianism you experience, it's only a crust of Confucianism. I don't know. But I guess in China, Confucians have become a crust for a long time already.
Yeah, yes, Confucianism here is definitely outdated, sort of transformed into Japanese style, so that which guarantee the power of those incompetent men. I guess. Do you agree with me, Chin-chan?
Okay. Maybe not.
Chin-chan is a Confucian, so he agrees with whatever you say.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chin-Chan. I'm a little bit older than you. Okay, it seems like Andre's gone for some reasons. I don't know why, but we've already spent 140 minutes, and I think it's good timing to wrap up.